Hi, I'm Krystal Moyers. I'm a certified health education specialist in the community outreach department. Andrea Kendall and I put together this food and mood presentation, empowering you to take care of your eating in hopes that it would be worthwhile for your mindful eating journey. So let's get started. So, first of all, what is mindfulness? Well, mindfulness is really paying attention to something in a particular way, in a non judgmental way, and remaining completely in the moment. And so, from thinking about mindfulness from a food perspective, really basing that on the principles of mindfulness and focusing on staying present in the moment when you're eating. This is a little bit different because than other ways of looking at food and eating. It's not a meal plan or any type of diet or exercise regimen. So again, this is a new way of looking at food and eating than many of us are accustomed to. Mindfulness illuminates habitual mental patterns and decreases self-sabotaging self-talk, allowing you to nurture a compassionate relationship with yourself, especially when looking at your habits and your reactions around food and eating. So that's what mindfulness is. But then let's take a deeper step into what is mindful eating all about. And that's really about maintaining in the moment awareness of food and observing rather than judging how food makes you feel, both mentally and physically. Listening to your body's signals that it's sending you, and for some of us, it's first being aware of the signals that our body is sending us, and then learning to listen to them, and identifying triggers, both internal and external triggers around food and eating. And an example would be staying mindful during an emotional eating episode. So even if we aren't able to stop eating during that emotional eating, we're at least able to be present and aware during that emotional eating episode. So mindful eating has 7 key critical skills, and we're going to talk a lot more about these. But just so they're on your radar in the next bit while we go through this presentation, the first is awareness. Another critical one is observation. Then being in the moment, being mindful of the environment, non-judgment, which we shall already hit on, letting go, and then acceptance. So intuitive eating is a key component of mindfulness. And intuitive eating really connects to mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of thoughts, and mindfulness of the body. So let's go dig into a little deeper into each one of those. So mindfulness of the mind is, what is my level of awareness at this moment? So thinking about your state of mind and noticing the taste, texture, and sound of the food as you eat it. And a question to ask yourself around that is, how present and aware am I while I was eating? So was I mindlessly munching? Was I completely zoned out? Or was I totally aware of each bite that I was taking? So next is mindfulness of feelings. How am I feeling as I am eating? Just really being mindful of your feelings and noticing if your feelings trigger you to start or to stop eating. So things like anxiety, guilt, stress, and boredom, those are just a few emotions that can really affect eating behavior. Sometimes identifying and coping with your feelings is as important as changing the types of foods that you eat. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes identifying and coping with your feelings is as important as changing the types of foods that you eat. So questions to consider is, how did I feel before I started eating? Was I excited, nervous, bored, feeling anxious? Next is mindfulness of thoughts. What was I thinking about while I was eating? Were my foods non-judgmental? Were they critical? So observe should or should not thoughts. Critical thoughts about yourself are really important. Things like, oh, I'm so fat, or food rules that you've put in place for yourself. We're going to talk a lot more about those. Good and bad food categories that you may assign. Notice how positive or negative thoughts are swaying your behavior around eating behaviors. Mindfulness of the body is next. How did my body feel before and after I ate? Did I listen to those body signals, those hunger cues? Really think about whether you pay attention when your body says to stop eating or whether you ignore the feedback your body is sending you. Identify how your body tells you you're hungry and how it tells you you're full. Tune into things like hunger pains and a rumbling stomach, your energy level. If you don't respond to those cues, your body will stop giving them to you over time. So, questions to consider. Was I hungry before I started eating? Did my meal fill me up? How did my body feel before I ate and after I ate? Was it what I wanted to eat? Those are all important things to consider. So intuitive eating has some basic principles of practicing mindfulness that I'd like us to dig in deeper to. And the first one goes into something that we touched on a little bit at the very beginning, and that is to reject the diet mentality. So again, this is a new way of looking at things. In our culture and just our society, the diet mentality is something that's become kind of part of the conversation around food and eating. So it's hard to think about it differently at times. But really, this is thinking about, am I hungry versus do I deserve to eat? Will it be satisfying versus is it a good or a bad food? Will this increase my health versus how much weight will I lose if I eat this? Or don't eat it. And, we have this dieter's dilemma diagram here that's really important to consider. And at the top is this desire to lose weight. So then a lot of time there's dieting and restricting that takes place. But after a certain amount of restricting, then usually cravings ensue. And so after a certain amount of cravings, they become overwhelming, and there's this loss of control and overeating that takes place, binging, if you will. And usually from those cravings and that overeating, then there's a regaining of that lost weight. Usually actually more weight is gained back than was actually lost. And so then there's this desire again to lose weight. And so dieting, restricting starts taking place, and it becomes this vicious cycle. And so thinking about it, rejecting the diet mentality and thinking about it from an intuitive eating perspective really helps to stay out of this vicious cycle. So the next principle of intuitive eating is honoring your hunger. And this is about keeping your body biologically fed with adequate energies and carbs so that you don't trigger a primal drive to overeat. We're going to look at the hunger scale in a minute, and you'll see on there that once you reach this point of excessive hunger, it's really hard to, no matter how good your intentions, it's really hard to just eat a moderate amount of food because your body's in what we call starvation mode. It thinks that you're going to continue to restrict it. So learning to honor this first biological signal really sets the stage to rebuild trust with your body, especially if you've been in that dieting cycle. The next is to make peace with food. This takes me back to thinking about kind of that teenager psyche. It's basic psychology to me. If you have a teenager or have ever been a teenager, this probably makes sense to you. So if you tell yourself you can't do something, usually you want to do it more. The same is true for this. If you tell yourself you can't have food and you restrict it, it usually leads to uncontrollable cravings. So, call a truce with yourself. Stop that food fight. Give yourself uncontrollable permission to eat. It won't lead to those intense feelings of deprivation that build into those uncontrollable cravings and then often lead to that binging. And because usually when you give into that forbidden food, then it leads to kind of that last supper overeating, and that leads to that overwhelming guilt. And we're gonna talk about that cycle in a minute too. So it's really about telling yourself that you can have it whenever you want it. That really makes that a lot less desirable. The next is challenge the food police. And that's those thoughts in your head around the good and the bad foods and the should and the should nots that'll tell us to restrict calories because it's a a bad food or eat the good foods. The food police monitor those unreasonable rules that the world of dieting has created. And that police station is really deep in our brains. And so really you have to chase away that food police to really give into this concept of intuitive eating and mindfulness. And that's really hard because, as we talked about, this has become part of our culture. And not only do foods become good or bad, but then as a result, we become good or bad for whether or not we eat those foods. And that can become really powerful. So we really have to work on this one. So I'm gonna give an example that may resonate with you. So, your inner voice says, oh, man, I've been so good on my diet the last few weeks. I'd love to have one of those brownies. And your inner food police says, if you have a brownie, you're gonna totally blow your diet. And then you eat a brownie. And your inner voice says, oh, I just have no willpower. It's all my fault. I'm so fat. I'm never gonna be able to lose weight. This is why I can't lose weight. And you feel disappointment, you feel sad, you feel out of control, you feel shameful, you feel guilty. And so what do you do then? You eat a second brownie, and then you probably eat a third brownie, and then you probably eat another one. And then if no one's around and no one's paying attention, then you probably eat the whole plate. And then what happens? You feel miserably full, uncomfortable, sick even, because you're so full, and you feel shame and guilt. So the trick is to challenge that food police at the very beginning. And when the food police say, if you have that brownie, you're going to blow it. You always blow it. You're going to blow it. You say, no, I know that I can eat brownies whenever I want them. I'd like to have one right now, but I know that plate's there. If I want more, I can have it whenever I want. If my kids eat those brownies, then I can just go out and make more. And so you eat one brownie and you feel satisfied and contentment because you know that in 3 hours, if you're hungry again, you could eat another one. But chances are, because you know you can have one whenever you want, you won't. And because you know you don't have to feel shame and guilt for having one, you don't have that desire to eat them all. And you can wrap them up and leave them on the counter. So the next one is failure. And I know that's not as easy as that example made it sound. And that takes time and a lot of practice, but it's possible to get there. So the next one is feel your fullness. And this is really when you listen to your body signals that you're no longer hungry. Just as we listen and honor our hunger so that we understand when we're hungry, we then listen for our feel our fullness and observe signs that show we're comfortably full. A good way to start doing this, if you're kind of out of touch with that fullness, is to pause in the middle of a meal, like when you're at a halfway point on your plate, and think, how am I feeling? Am I starting to feel full now? And a good way to do that is to see if the bites you're having then are as good as the first bites were, because that kind of signals that your body is starting to get full. It's just not enjoying it as much. It's not as satisfying as it was at the very beginning. The next principle of intuitive eating is discovering the satisfaction factor. And this is around eating foods that you're truly hungry for, so that you'll be much more satisfied. You'll be not only physically full, but also emotionally satiated. And I know, when I'm really hungry for something, I can eat what I think I should, and then I'm not getting full emotionally, and I end up eating what I think I should, and then going back and eating what I really wanted anyway. So I ate all those other things and then still go and eat what I really wanted to begin with. And so, I think to really identify what you're truly hungry for, not just what you think you should or should not eat, and understanding whether it's a craving or not a craving, something that can be really powerful exercise to do is, and it sounds kind of corny, but it can work, is to really take a moment, stop, be mindful, be present, close your eyes, focus, and listen to what your body is telling you. Like, what am I hungry for? And actually, like, ask your stomach, like, what are you hungry for right now? And I've done that and prepared a meal that's different than what my body has told me I'm hungry for, because again, it's not what I think I should eat. And started to prepare it and realize, the smells. And as I'm imagining eating it, I'm not going to enjoy that at all. In fact, it's starting to make me feel it's unappetizing. And I've put that meal aside for later and fixed something else completely, because I know that is not going to make me feel satiated. And so I encourage you, as you're starting to through this journey, even though I know it may be difficult as you're preparing meals for your family and such, to really give yourself the opportunity to eat what you're hungry for. The next is cope with your emotions without using food. And this is a huge part of intuitive eating, and that is recognizing that emotional eating does not solve emotional problems, and finding ways to comfort, nurture, distract, and resolve your issues without using food. Anxiety, loneliness, boredom, and anger are emotions we all experience through life. Each has a trigger and an appeasement, but we know that food won't fix any of these problems. It can comfort for the short term, for sure, but it won't solve the problem. And we ultimately have to deal with the source of the emotion as well as the discomfort of overeating. So we're going to talk about some ways to comfort without food in a bit. Some other ideas are, listening to music, doing deep breathing, meditating, calling a friend, taking a bubble bath, writing in a journal, reading, going for a walk, working in the garden. Just another way to get in touch with yourself and, another part of your brain without using food as a coping mechanism. Next is respect your body. So I wear a size 8.5 shoe, depending on the brand, the cut of the shoe. And so it would be really uncomfortable for me to try to squeeze my foot into a 6 or a 6.5 shoe. And so I have to respect that I don't have an itty bitty foot. And, the same can be said for our bodies. Sometimes we have to accept our genetic blueprint and respect our body for the size that it is. We then can start to feel better about who we are and start on this intuitive eating and mindfulness journey. It's hard to reject that diet mentality if we're unrealistic and overly critical of our body and our body shape. So basic premises of body respect are things like, my body deserves to be fed. My body deserves to be treated with dignity. My body deserves to be dressed comfortably and in the manner I am accompanied to. My body deserves to be touched affectionately and with respect. My body deserves to move comfortably. So this presentation doesn't dive deep into body acceptance, but it is helpful if we can at least stop or at least recognize negative comments and stop them, or start on the path to replacing them with a positive comment. As we said, to begin to reject the diet mentality and do the work of intuitive eating. So some examples would be, my arms are so fat. See that as a negative. Say, wait a second, I don't have space for that. And replace it with a positive, like, my muscular arms help me carry my daughter. Or if your negative is, my body is so out of shape, it's disgusting, and you say, really, I know that's negative, and I'm stopping that thought in its tracks, but I can't really think of anything positive to say about my body. I'm just not there yet. And that's real. So maybe you could replace a positive statement with something else about yourself. Like, I have this beautiful, long, thick hair that I just love. And maybe that's where you are right now. And that's a start along that path. So next is exercise. And this is not, we're not talking about militant exercise, but really about just moving your body at the pace that you feel comfortable with, and to get active, to feel the difference, not focusing on calorie burn, but really on focusing on exercise as a way to take care of yourself and improving your health. Things like increasing bone strength, increasing stress tolerance, improving your health outcomes, reducing risk of chronic disease, increasing heart and lung strength, reducing stress, all those, just feeling better overall and increasing your energy. The next is honoring your health. And this is really kind of a summation of all of the intuitive eating principles that we've talked about from a high level. So making food choices that honor your health and your taste buds while making you feel well and healthy. Remember, you don't have to eat a perfect diet to be healthy. You will not suddenly get a nutrient deficiency or gain weight from one snack or one meal or one day of eating. It's what you eat consistently over a period of time that really matters. And as you're on this journey, it's really progress, not perfection, that counts. So focus on things like, do I really like the taste of foods, or am I being a diet martyr or a health martyr? How does this food or type of food make my body feel? Do I have increased energy? Am I able to play with my kids or my grandkids the way I want? How do I feel when I'm eating consistently in this manner? Do I like that feeling? Am I experiencing differences in my energy level? So to switch gears a little bit, we talked about food isn't good or bad, and neither are you. And so reframing those negative thoughts and beliefs. We know that what we think affects how we feel, which affects what we do. And so some common beliefs or thoughts around food and eating that we want to work to reframe are: I am helpless around food. I'm bad, lazy, disgusting, worthless when I don't eat like I should. I should eat now because it's lunchtime, and that's when I'm supposed to eat. I have to accept food when it's offered to me, even if I'm not hungry. Eating whatever my body wants means I'm out of control, and I'll gain weight, and who knows when the weight will stop. I'll never be able to trust my body. I'll always have to have this structure in place and restrict what I eat and how I eat it and how I prepare it. And these may resonate with you or not, or there may be others that negative thoughts and beliefs that resonate more with you. And please feel free to jot those down if that's the case. But what we really want to do is we want to reframe these thoughts and beliefs. Because again, this kind of goes back to that inner food police. So another example would be, there are lots of bad and forbidden foods that I shouldn't eat. So a way to reframe that would be, there is no such thing as bad or forbidden foods. Foods can be nutritious or not, but they don't have good or bad qualities, and neither do I for eating them. So these are just some examples of those inner thoughts and beliefs that fill our head that become those food police then. And we really need to challenge them with those principles of intuitive eating. So think about the negative thoughts and beliefs that you have in your head, and how they become your food police, and how you can start to challenge them with some of the principles of intuitive eating that we talked about. So again, another example is, I have to clear my plate because it's wrong to be wasteful. And the reframing will be, I have a right to stop eating when I'm full, even if there's food left. So we've talked some about hunger and fullness. And so on this slide, there are 2 hunger and fullness scales. You can find a lot of versions out there, and I encourage you to look at one that resonates with you. So these are, as I said, 2 different ones. One starts at 0 and goes to 10, and one starts at 1 and goes to 10. They're all pretty similar. The one at the top gives you kind of the symptomology, I'll say, of what it is to be too hungry or too full. So like headache, nausea, irritability, lightheadedness, loss of focus. And the bottom says, you're having that almost starving feeling, and you're getting like dizzy at that point. And then too full is uncomfortably full, stomach stretched out, painfully full, nauseous, and then the bottom says that you're feeling sick. And so pretty much on any of these hunger and fullness cues, 0, 1 is going to be where you're way too hungry. You've allowed yourself to get on. If you were a car, you would be running on empty. Your gas light would be beyond on. And 10, too full, that is the point where, they say, Thanksgiving Day full, like you have done that last supper eating, you are way too full. And so as you can see on the hunger scale on the bottom, that goes into like red. So obviously you want to stay in what's the neutral area, not hungry, not too full, the satisfied area. So you always want to try to be in the middle of a 4 to 6, at the most a 3 to 7. You don't want to allow yourself to get in those red and orange areas. So the idea is to start eating at a 4, at the most at a 3, and then to stop eating at a 6 or 7, because there's going to be that delayed response as your body catches up. And that way you won't allow yourself to get too hungry or too full. And you're listening to your body's signals as soon as you hear them, and you don't allow yourself to get too full to overeat. Now, this takes practice, because first you have to learn what your body is telling you, and then you have to start to respond to it. As you do a better job of responding to your body, or listening to your body, then you'll better able to respond to it more quickly. And so to practice that, we've included a chart here on the slide as well. And this just allows you to log. This is not at all meant to be a food log, but it just allows you to say, okay, at breakfast, I started right before I ate, I was feeling a 3. And I paused halfway through I was eating, and I was at 6. So I went ahead and stopped eating. And then like a half an hour after I ate, I felt a 7. So maybe I should have stopped eating a little bit before I did. And that just allows you to evaluate how this is working for you. And you can do that then at every meal. So this is a quote that I really like. There is no food that will fill emotional hunger, and no diet that can curb it. When you are emotionally hungry, you need to tend to your emotions. When you are physically hungry, you need to eat food. You're the only one who can know the nature of your hunger. And that quote is from a workbook that I really like. We do have some books that we use as sources for this presentation listed at the end on some additional resources too that we just feel may be helpful for additional reading, and I'll have those on a slide at the end. But I just thought this is a very powerful quote and really like it. So to go a little bit into the emotional side of things, this is known as the cycle of emotional eating. So you can see here anger, sadness, loneliness, depression. These are areas where you're kind of in distress, which can lead to overeating, which can lead to your emotional intensity, decreasing for the moment, but then you feel guilt and shame from overeating, and then that leads to poor self-image, which then leads to distress again, which leads to overeating, and it becomes this cycle of overeating and guilt and shame and poor self-image and distress. Now, of course, we all use foods to celebrate victories or in moments of severe distress, but when food becomes our primary coping mechanism, it can create an unhealthy cycle in which the underlying feeling or problem never really gets addressed. And so that's what we want to make sure we're not doing, is using, food as our primary coping mechanism. So, this is kind of a somewhat, jovial image here, emotional eating. I'm hungry, I'm hormonal, I hate him, it's my birthday, it's Monday, I'm drunk. But really, these are all things that, are they emotional around emotional eating? Are you really hungry? Or if not, what could you be? So are you fatigued? Are there external cues that are leading you to eat, like everyone else around you is eating? Or it's lunchtime. Are you bored? Are you sad? Are you having a craving? Are you stressed? Are you rewarding yourself for some reason? Like you got through a really hard week at work. Are you angry? Are you really feeling a physical hunger, or is there something else going on? So there are some psychological factors that can lead to eating. And they're kind of categorized in 6 main buckets. So the first one is disinhibition, and this is the ability to stop eating when full. And one good way is to do that body scan, kind of that pausing in the middle of eating to see if you're starting to get full. That can kind of break that food trance that we can get in while we're eating. Even doing some deep breathing while you pause eating, look out the window, really to check in with yourself. The next is awareness. This is just when you're not present while you're eating. And a way to stay present is to focus on your senses when you're eating. So to be in touch with the colors and the flavors and the smells of the food, again, to make sure you're still tasting and smelling the food as much in the middle of your meal as you were at the beginning. The next is external cues. And this is when external cues trigger non-hunger eating episodes. So like it's somebody's birthday at work and they're handing out cake, but you're not actually hungry, or you're going on a road trip and your family always eats on road trips, or it's you get a lunch break every day at 11:30, but you're really not hungry at 11:30 for lunch. Or there's external cues that tell us to eat. And so the situational cues can be tricky. And so to allow yourself to remove yourself from external cues as much as possible when you aren't hungry. Emotional response is the next one, and this is really around that emotional eating. So eating to calm negative emotion or stress, and this is when we can really depend on some of our coping skills that are our tools in our toolbox, which we're going to talk about more in just a moment, and depending on our friends and family for emotional support. Distraction, this is eating quickly or with external distraction. So things like eating really, really quickly, especially in front of the TV or on a lunch break or in front of our phones. I think this is one that probably we could all work on. And so making a commitment to put down our phones when we're eating or turn off the TV, or as moms to not eat standing up while we're doing 100 other things, eating without distraction. And then the last one is self-kindness and practicing forgiveness. And this kind of goes back to the food police, recognizing that inner self-critic and practicing self-kindness and self-acceptance, and practicing forgiveness when you have a misstep in this journey. This is a long journey and a process, and so to practice forgiveness when we make that progress and not perfection, and that's okay. So many of us find ourselves feeling lost as we try to change our relationship with food because we have been using food to soothe ourselves, sometimes even without realizing it. So it's helpful to recognize, times of anger, anxiety, or sadness, or other intense emotions. And as we move away from using food to help cope, develop skills to help us self-soothe. And one really neat way to do that is to use the 5 senses. So first we need to identify that when we're upset, and we can check in with our body. Our bodies typically send us early warning signs. We usually, though, train ourselves to ignore them and, power through, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But usually, our body will actually change in temperature. We'll get really hot or cold when we're upset, or we'll tense up. I get really tense. Our stomach may hurt, or we get short of breath. If you can't identify the early warning signs that your body personally sent to you, then you can rewind the tape and think of a time where you were very anxious or stressed or upset, and try to think about how your body responded. Or pay attention to the signals your body sends you the next time that something stressful is happening, like you're running really late when you need to not be running late, or worrying about paying a bill, or frustrated with a coworker, or whatever the situation may be. And notice how your body physically responds to that emotional situation. Now, it's important in that situation that you give yourself permission to feel, because we are a lot of times are taught that we shouldn't feel, and we should kind of squash those emotions down and not have that reaction. And remember that feelings are normal and healthy. They're what makes us human. So allow yourself to feel in that moment so you can identify, how you really respond. And once you identify that, you'll know when you need to step in to self-soothe. So our five senses are a great way to do this. They're quick and easy pathways to use when we're trying to self-soothe and cope with intense emotions. You may find you're already doing this. As I go through the list of some ideas, be open to new ways to self-soothe. They work best when we have several different ways we know how to help ourselves. So for sight, good examples are looking at photographs of fun moments you've had with family and friends, photographs of nature, or just even looking out the window, looking at a candle flame flicker, looking at the stars. Hearing can be listening to music, a guided meditation, or sounds of nature. Taste, of course, mindfully, can be sipping hot tea, tasting something with a strong flavor like a lemon drop or a fireball, and eating meals without distraction. Smell can be smelling something like body lotion or perfume, a scented candle, fresh flowers. Touch can be hugging something like a soft pillow, something fluffy, feeling Play-Doh and working that in your hands, squeezing a stress ball, petting an animal, holding a smooth stone, like a worry rock almost, or even an ice pack in your hand, because that's such a difference in temperature. So what sensory experiences are most powerful to you? What are you already doing? And from that list, what do you think you could explore? And after you get a chance to experiment with a few new things, and please take an opportunity to do that, then create yourself a sensory toolkit. So an emergency box that, as you're having a strong emotional response to something, that's your go-to and to utilize instead of turning to food. And, especially if it's something tactile in there, like the worry rock or the Play-Doh, that you can really keep your hands busy, because I know a lot of people, they find that the food is great because it keeps their hands busy, the hand-to-mouth situation. And so especially if you have something in there that can keep your hands busy and not eating. So another coping skill, kind of like a mnemonic that can be helpful, is improve the moment. So playing off the improve, the I for imagery. So transport yourself to a safe space in your mind. Think of an image that is meaningful to you when you visualize it, and tap into the feeling that image evokes. Meaning, think about what is important to you in your life, your values, really finding meaning for you in your life in that distressful situation. Prayer. And prayer doesn't have to just necessarily be religious, but you could use a mantra, a quote, a song lyric, or a prayer when you're feeling stressed. And we're going to talk about mantras in just a minute. So keep this in mind. Relaxation. Something to help you with the tension from that emotional distress. deep breathing or stretching or progressive muscle relaxation. I mentioned that for me, I get really tense when I get stressed. So progressive muscle relaxation works really well for me. You can look them up online. You can do them while you're driving or sleeping, but it can be a really powerful tool. One thing in the moment. So this is using mindfulness to deliberately focus on one thing at a time to slow down your thoughts. So it really fits well back in with mindfulness. So focusing on one thing, just keep your mind from racing and, letting go of past worries and future worries and just focusing on one thing. Vacation. So don't get too excited. We're talking about maybe a mental vacation or even, a mini vacation where you go visit a favorite park or go to a friend's house or even, like your bathroom and take a bubble bath, but, a mini vacation. Encouragement. Be honest with yourself, but provide realistic and hopeful encouragement. So next we want to talk a little bit about continual self-care. So we've talked a lot about some things to help you get started in your mindful and intuitive eating journey. But even after you start on that path, we want to help you continue your self-care journey. And one thing to do is have empathetic assertion of your eating rights, because this is very important for you to continue on your path. So I have just a few examples, and these, again, may or may not resonate with you, but please do come up with your own. So I'll read a few of the examples. I have the right to feel hungry no matter what my weight is. I am responsible for my behavior and feelings. I am not responsible for how others choose to feel when I am assertive about taking care of myself. I have the right to ask for reasonable accommodations from others that will help me to exercise and eat based on my own needs. So the last one resonated with me. I'll share that. For instance, when I would go to a restaurant and order, as I learned what things made my body feel good at certain times and what didn't, I would be that person that would ask for like a menu item or like a recipe item to be left off of a menu item. And that took me a while to feel comfortable doing that. But I encourage you to know what works for you and to be assertive about that. And again, feel free to come up with your own rights that work for you. So the next is eating for maximum energy and satisfaction. And this is purely an experiment to determine what amounts and kinds of foods and food combinations lead you to having the most energy and feeling the best mentally and physical for satisfaction. And so again, this is not meant to be a food log either, but really looking at the types of foods that you eat, what time during the day, and how you feel afterwards, physically and emotionally, just to determine what works and what doesn't work for you. So some kind of chart like this in whatever form works best for you may be helpful to determine that as you experiment with different types of foods that make your body feel good. And at first, as you continue in your mindful eating, you may need to act as your own personal coach to check in with yourself before and after you eat. And this allows you to analyze, what went well and what didn't go well. And so really encourage you to kind of have this self-talk going on, along with some positive affirmations and mantras that we'll talk about in just a minute. So, you may wake up in the morning and say, I'm really not that hungry right now. But, I know that I'm more productive in the morning hours if I eat breakfast. And so even though I'm not hungry, I know that I will be in like an hour, and my meeting schedule is tight today, or my patient load is tight today, and I really should eat breakfast. So I know I'll regret it if I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and eat, or I'm going to grab a bar that I can grab and go. And then, you may try something new for lunch one day, and afterwards, like an hour after, you may check in with yourself and just say, does that work? Yeah, that totally worked. I feel really good. I'm feeling really comfortable, not too full, not still hungry. So that was really good for me. Or you may say, that sandwich, it was really heavy in carbs, too heavy, and not enough in protein and veggies and fiber. And it made me feel too full and sleepy. And I think I'm going to try something different tomorrow. And just be your own coach and maybe fill out one of those forms so you can figure out what works and what doesn't work for you. And so, it's also maybe helpful to use some self-affirmations to continue to encourage you to think positively about the important things in your life. And these are just a few examples. Please, pick one of these or come up with your own that work for you. Again, I'll read a few of these and then I'll let you read the rest. I can eat any and all foods whenever I want. There is no need to binge. No matter what my body looks like, I will still be me. I deserve to nourish my body. The foods I choose to eat do not impact my self-worth. And so along with positive self-affirmations, we encourage you to create a mantra. And a mantra is a meaningful word or statement. And creating your own personal mantra is kind of like your own slogan. Like if you were a business, it would be your slogan or statement of purpose. So really like what you're about and who you are. And especially as you go through mindful eating and intuitive eating journey. And hopefully that will help you stay headed in the right direction. And on days that are just a little bit more rough, keep you, motivated and energized. So the first one on here is May I Be Well, and that was my personal mantra. So I included it as the first one because it means a lot to me, but you should choose one that resonates with you and speaks to you. So there's a couple others on this slide, but definitely pick one that works for you. And like I said, just on a bad day, that would be like my go-to. If I, had negative self-talk or the food police, and even if I couldn't counteract it or say something positive, I could at least say, may I be well. And that would at least keep me headed in the right direction, even if that was all I got, And so I encourage you to pick one that works for you. So something like I nourish my mind with a loving heart, or I listen to my body, or I'm cultivating a peaceful relationship with my body. Again, I encourage you to seek out one that works for you. So these are some resources that we've used when putting together these slides, and as well as some additional books that correspond with the information that was in this presentation. Please feel free to take a picture of this slide and seek out some of these books. There's some great authors and some great books here that I found really helpful in my personal library, and I would love for you to check out as well. And these are some mindfulness and meditation apps that you can find in your Google Play Store on your phone or whatever you have on your phone. Most of them are free. I don't think any of them are charged, or at least some of them should be free. So I encourage you to check those out. I thank you so much for attending this today. I really appreciate you joining the presentation. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer them. Feel free to reach out to me via email if you would like to. I'm really passionate about this topic and would welcome any follow-up. My email is KMOYERS@AugustaHealth.com. So feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns, and would love to speak to you more. And again, just thank you so much, and may you be well.